ahead. Let's get the read on all of this from someone who can at least help them out understanding the defense side of all this. Defense Priority Senior Fellow Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. Colonel, very good to have you.
Always good to be here. Thanks, Neil.
You know, it's interesting, Colonel, you and I have chatted about this before, and blessedly you look at bigger and more important things than just making money. But again, I am not so brave, but I'm looking at this, I'm finding traders who are parking their money in oil are convinced right now that it's going to go still higher. They're convinced that things are going to continue to agitate in the Middle East, and they're betting some money on it. So they see the world a little bit differently than do those who might look favorably at an upcoming peace accord, maybe with the North Koreans, or things calming down with Iran. How do you see it?
Well, it's certainly in the Middle East. I mean, that's almost like the status quo of destabilization and things always changing. And that's actually one of the reasons why I was a big supporter when President Trump said that he was going to take the U.S. troops out of Syria, because there's no good thing that can come from that. And as you see, no matter whether we're there or whether we're not there, there's going to be instability, and we just need to make sure that it doesn't affect American interests. You know,
what I'm wondering is whether the Iranians then, if you buy what the Israelis are saying, are going to use this as an excuse to get ever more aggressive in the region, which could explain why not a single country in that region signed on to Barack Obama's original Iranian deal. They were leery of it. Now, the question is, what does Iran do? If they've already started launching these attacks on Israeli positions in Syria, and of course Israel responds, what's next?
Yeah, no, I don't see it that way. I think that Iran, the last thing they want to do is be seen as being passive and being a victim of Trump withdrawing from this. So I think that they stirred up the pot, made a little bit of noise here. But I don't think they're going to go too far, because they have their own national interest to take care of. And if they push Israel too far, I mean, Israel doesn't play around. And if they feel that their security is being threatened, they will hit, and hit hard. And so I think you'll see that over time here, Iran is going to back down a little bit and just go a little bit quiet.
You know, right now, as you know, Colonel, there's been no indication that those who had originally signed on to the Iranian agreement, by that including England and Russia, China, France, Germany, they're not predisposed right now to hop on with President Trump on this. Will they eventually be? Because if it's just us, that could make getting Iran to change its behavior a little tough, right?
That's correct, and I got to say, for all the accolades I've been giving President Trump, especially on this North Korea, his performance so far, I really wish he had not pulled out of that agreement, because there's almost no upside for us. Because whatever flaws the agreement had, it still was an intrusive situation. We did still have external eyes and ears inside the country, and that's potentially could leave. But you know, the question's got to be, okay, if that's not a good deal, how is this going to make us have a better deal? Because now there's less constraints on them. So I can understand why Europe's not going to want to get rid of that, because they worked hard to get those constraints in there, and I think they're concerned that they may actually lose that. So they're going to do what they can to keep it in place.
Yeah, you need some company on this, whether you like the agreement or not. And so far, it's just us, which might be fine, and we might be able to exert some pressure, to your point, Colonel. If you could stay there, sir, I want to bring in American Islamic Forum for Democracy founder Zuhdi Jasser. Zuhdi, I'll ask you something I kind of raised with the Colonel here, this notion that if we are alone and other countries that signed on to this, the 5 other countries that signed on to this, don't bend and want to stick with this, and you're Iran and you've gotten all of this money already, what would incentivize anything to change here? In other words, for the president to get his way?
Well, Neil, I think we've been painting the wrong picture based on the picture that the Obama administration had forced us to paint, which is one of weakness, leading from behind, basically letting the Iranians be as belligerent and as they want, and fueling terror into Syria, etc. So now let's repaint that. But
wasn't that built into the whole deal? I mean, I can remember when Barack Obama cobbled this together and Secretary of State Kerry working on this. They were belligerent and loud and in your face and sticking it to America and death to America throughout that whole process. We still signed a deal, still got a deal, so what changed?
Well, Neil, the belligerence of Iran is militarily. It's not just about their nuclear belligerence. It's about what they've done in Syria, the positioning of missiles, the advancement of Iranian Revolutionary Guard, what they've been doing to us in Iraq. So I think
Zuhdi,
now
I don't know who to believe. I mean, you're very knowledgeable, far more than I, about the region, but when I hear the IAEA and all these other independent entities that say that there has been no regeneration of nuclear activity, or nothing to indicate, at least since the accord, that they have escalated efforts. I know the Israelis say otherwise, even though they seem to be going back to, the country originally lying to begin with. So once a liar gets in their eyes, always a liar. Having said that, how are we going to rally support globally for this if all the independent entities that we signed on to are quibbling with our rationale for ripping it up?
Well, we're going to rally support by proving that it works, proving that ultimately it's not just about the nuclear belligerence, but about their military advancement, that economic sanctions in the Bush era led to the '09 revolution in Iran. And now that went on pause, and now we have a revolution in Iran happening again. They're starting to cheer the fact that the economic fuel to their regime is going to go away as we start imposing sanctions. So I think a sanctions regime is going to start even weakening the Iranian economy more. They are crippled right now because of what the revolution's been doing to banks, etc. And now with the increased sanctions, I think it's going to cause them to blink. And also the missiles they launched yesterday, they are testing the red line of the Trump administration. And this administration is not weak like Obama. And we're going to stand behind our allies. And I think our allies like Israel are emboldened. The revolution is emboldened. So, Neil, finally, we are on the offense of emboldening our allies, and Iran is on the defense.
That might be so, but Colonel, to that original point that you raised, and I know we're told that the defense secretary shares this view, even though he doesn't shout it, that our allies are the ones that signed on to this, our European allies, our major ones. And Zudi's quite right to say those in the Middle East did not. But if they don't bend, and if they're questioning the rationale behind this, and all things are equal, Iran heats things up with these attacks, or whatever you want to call it, drives oil prices still higher. Maybe that's their strategy for sticking it to us. For all of a sudden, you, America, are looking at higher gas prices this summer. Congratulations.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, you can imagine Iran will do what they can from their position of weakness, because they're not just going to sit passively by and literally just let us do anything that we want. But I guess I have a bit of a different view than many on theirs, that I believe that the weakness of Iran is exposed by what the things that they try to do, because it's relatively small scale. Israel does not hesitate to hit back, and our power is so much greater than anything that Iran is doing, that if they ever cross the red line, which I define as anything that affects American interests, then there's no question that we'll hit back, as we always will. But if it's not something that affects American interest, I think to some extent that we can let them do whatever they want to try to do to make a little bit of noise that doesn't affect anything over there, because we will never hesitate to defend our interests no matter what.
Zudi, that could be the fear too, right?
Well, absolutely, but I think we are living in a fantasy land if we think that Iran wasn't doing what it could to advance near to the Israeli border, to make Syria into a client state, to take over what the gains we had made in Iraq. So we finally have to begin to push back. This everything at the altar of the nuclear deal, forget everything else, short, mid-range missiles, doesn't matter. We just sort of let them expand into the region, into the border of Israel. That has to change, because we are living in a new era, I think, where not only are we on the offense, but now there's going to be, I think, soil for the revolution to begin to grow, as the regime is going to be weakened economically, and they're going to find themselves up against an American wall, an Israeli wall militarily that is now emboldened.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you both. I don't know what either of you said, but if you're helping the markets, you're either calming them down or at least reinforcing